This week, I had to visit a friend's parents in Dehradun. And of course, there was a silver lining of getting away from the summer heat. On my visit to their place, I was blown away by the luxuries in their residential community. Today, I'm at Antara. It's a 14-acre senior living residential development in Dehradun. It's a beautiful property where you've got about 200 residential units, all taken up by seniors who love living here. Glorious views, golf carts, putting greens, private movie theatres, medical facilities on call. Far from what I thought would be a senior living community. These people really seem to be having the time of their lives. And I kept wondering why someone would build this in Dehradun, what the economics of this place looks like, and how senior residences are different from the kind of houses you and I live in. To understand this, I decided to meet with Tara. She's the vice chairman of Max Group and the founder of Antara. We went deep into the needs of the elderly and everything there is to build a business for the silver generation. This is Founder's Office with Sarthak Ahuja. Whenever there's a new industry, there's a lot of baggage of everyone who's looking at what's really happening here. I think the biggest baggage that I would consider the senior living industry comes in with is these are NRIs who don't have the time to come to India, and they're willing to pay a premium to absolve themselves of the guilt that we're unable to spend time with our parents, which is why it's tough. You may give the best of facilities, but how do you really optimize for joy and elongating their life? And then when you say, okay, in a community, they've got other people like them, where they can do puja part with them, they can play with them.
Yeah.
Then comes the question or the baggage to say that because they've spent 60, 70 years of their life, they're very set in their ways, it's very difficult for them to make friends. And I think before we dive into the industry and other economics, this is something I wanted to understand from you.
Yeah.
Is this a perception that you faced when you started? Is it something that you continue to battle? Or is it something that you feel you've majorly solved in some way?
Actually, my experience has been different to that. And one of the reasons why it has been different is because we've been very specific about how we have talked to potential clients. We actually believe in encouraging independence and really financial and life independence in our clients. So we always, when we marketed Antara Dehradun, there were conversations with end users, either people who were going to live there, and we targeted them knowing that they were in a position to make their own financial decisions. So their children were secondary in the decision making. So that guilt factor didn't exist in this conversation. In fact, the guilt factor worked against us, because when some of our residents chose to say, look, we want to liquidate a family home to put some money into savings and put some money into Antara, that's when the children woke up and got quite sort of sensitive, saying you are disinvesting what we think may come to us to create a lifestyle for yourself now. So it actually worked reverse. So very few of our transactions in Antara, Dehradun, and later Noida and Gurgaon were different, were actually transacted by children. It was the end users, end residents themselves who were progressive, who believed in independence, wanted joy, and understood that joy came from a community. So that was one hypothesis that I would differ with now. Two, my vision was always that the staff are there to enable the day-to-day, to keep spaces clean, to keep space, the upkeep of, because spaces really create experiences. So you cannot ignore infrastructure and hardware, to program manage ideas that residents have, to have the entire health and wellness backing, because that is something we take very, very seriously. But ultimately, the community has to fend for itself. And that can only happen when you curate a little bit of the mindset of the people that are coming in.
Okay.
So all of our residents we spoke to, why are you taking this decision? Is this a financial decision? Is it a life decision? Is it a medical decision? Introduce them to people who had already bought, sometimes even introduce them to people who chose not to buy, so that they had a full paradigm of decision making before they wrote us a check. And now we have seen the community kick in. It has taken that long, and that community is what is creating the joy. The staff are just enablers.
So now it's been about 8 years of Antara actually being in operation.
Yes. Wow.
Okay,
Yeah.
and 196 units.
Yeah.
Um, what would you say is your ideal customer persona? Like exactly what kind of people? One thing that you mentioned is these people earned their own money, which is why they
Yeah.
were buying it.
Yeah.
So we can imagine that they've come from a certain kind of wealth. They've
Right.
achieved something in their life.
Right.
Are most of them business owners in some capacity?
Initially, it started like that because there were initially the persona was 60-ish, young enough to still have the gumption to take a financial decision, because we all know as we get older, we become financially a lot stricter with
Correct.
ourselves. Two were people who initially had some sort of connect with Dehradun, because otherwise people were pushing back and saying, why would I go and live in a place like Dehradun? So DOSCOs, or who had had some family
Hmm.
connect, etc. And three were people who lived alone.
Okay.
That was really something we targeted. We were not trying to go into joint family structures or even nuclear families where it was, let's say, just the parents and their adult children, and trying to create a shift in that living ecosystem, but essentially people living by themselves.
Okay.
Because what we were saying is, you are living by yourself, these are your expenses where you are living, but if you were to really assess your quality of life, where are you on that metric? We had our own quality of life metrics and conversations. And you'd be amazed, Sarthak, that people living in the most beautiful homes in a place like Delhi, for example. We didn't target Bombay, Bangalore initially because people needed to have some understanding of the North. They needed to know that if they wanted to come back into Delhi, where their friend circle was or their
Hmm.
clubs, etc., they could. But when they really had that deep conversation about their existing quality of life, that's what shook them. So the persona was therefore people living independently who we knew had income, to the extent that even if they didn't want to liquidate their current property, they could still buy and do our monthly charges. And three, people who believed in that sense of community.
Okay. And would you say a great part of these are people who are single while they're elderly, or you see couples
No,
taking this decision?
we majority couples. It's only later we discovered that there was an interesting market of single women,
Hmm.
who actually were very attracted to an Antara concept. There, the children played a role,
Okay.
interestingly, in the decision making, right? And that stems from just the age old mindset of women taking independent financial decisions.
Hmm.
It's still an exception, not the
Yeah.
norm.
Yeah.
And in that ecosystem, the children played a very active role in that decision making, all for the positive. When it was a single woman, it was always a positive encouragement. When it was a single man, there was always a bit of resistance from the children.
So when you say the quality of life, despite living in the best of houses, wasn't there,
Mm.
do you mean it in terms of a lot of people we would see as they age? Um, Despite having all resources, they typically don't want to spend as much on beautifying the house. They can afford a nurse who's coming home. There's a full-time caretaker,
Yeah,
someone who can cook, clean, all of that.
yeah.
So, what parts of the quality of life do you think came in as a value proposition which was different, which wasn't being served despite all resources?
So I think it was the ease of living to begin with.
Okay.
When you look at urban environments like Singapore, for example, everything that you possibly need from an ease of living point of view, whether you need to buy groceries, you need to say hello to a friend, you need a quick doctor's checkup, um, you need to do sports and movement, all of it is within your ecosystem. It's
Hmm.
walking distance.
Hmm.
In a place like Delhi specifically, that doesn't exist
Hmm.
unless you're living in a condo. And
Yeah.
condo living was not that prevalent when we
Hmm.
started Antara. Today it is. So you can
Hmm.
that can actually give Antara as a concept a bit of competition in that
So the
sense.
older people are actually used to living in independent houses, so which
Correct.
is why they don't have the community.
Correct.
Hmm.
And those are therefore the people we went and spoke to. We did not go and do any activations in condos, because a lot of what we were offering at that point, because it was yet to be proven and it was yet to be tangibilized, people could say, but we're getting this in our condo. What is the USP there? It's
Hmm.
only now, 8 years into operations, when people walk into an Antara community like Dehradun, where they see actual community between people and they see the health and wellness activation, are they able to appreciate the USP we have versus a condo?
Hmm.
But at that time, a conversation with people living in independent homes was able to convey that USP.
Okay.
So to come down and not be able to go for a walk comfortably, or to not be able to socialize with your peers, or not be able to have a nice environment where you could go into the activities you wanted, whether it was a game of bridge or whether it was just learning something new together or going for a movie. It always needed a lot of facilitation, and that's very fatiguing for people as they get older. And of course, the medical care and health and wellness. Everybody lives with insecurities,
Correct.
especially in an urban environment like Delhi where an ambulance can't get to you, or a doctor, the old, sort of colony doctor. There would always be a GP in your colony. That
That's right.
doesn't exist anymore.
Hmm.
The entire GP fraternity is down to negligible numbers,
That's
which
right.
I think is a whole other conversation in the
Yeah.
healthcare world. So that's the elements of ease of living that we were trying to plug in, saying you get social, you get, and that's how we actually broke up the value proposition of Antara. We actually created 14 different dimensions of wellness that we believed impacted lives. We clubbed them together into 6 7 dimensions of wellness, and everything we do fit into one of those dimensions of wellness, whether
Okay.
it's the quality of food that we serve,
So what are these dimensions? You said 6,
so
7.
occupational wellness, intellectual wellness, spiritual wellness, physical wellness, communal wellness, sort of medical
Okay.
and health wellness. So everything we do, we plug into one of that. So if it's our nutrition, is plugged into one thing. If it's hobby classes, it's part of another dimension of wellness. If it's how do we make sure the community gets to know each other. My dream was always actually that the community should be run by residents.
Yeah.
That was sort of the big dream.
Yeah.
But I think the ego that comes into
Yeah.
the Indian mindset doesn't allow that to happen.
So it's tough. It's breaking.
Tough.
It's happening now.
It's I think the sense of community is huge, but the operations still are very much with us, and I think that's probably the way it's going to be.
So I'm thinking, when I'm thinking of elders in my family, even with resources, what happens is that when you ask them to move out of their own house where they used to living,
Very difficult.
their kids may be abroad. They may not necessarily have friends around them,
Yeah.
but they may still not want to leave the comfort of that house. Also, because they may say that when children visit us in, say, a Delhi, they can easily take a flight and be here and leave the following day, even if
Yeah.
it's on a weekend. And suddenly to propose a place like Dehradun, has that been an inhibition where you feel that now they feel they're, while they may be right next to a medical facility, they would have housekeeping, they would have other people of the same age.
Yeah.
But do they miss that? Do you think that's something which still needs to be plugged?
So, Sarthak, I'm not trying to cater to every senior
Absolutely.
130 million in India. Even if you bisect that to people who can afford us, or this persona I talked about, even if I tried, I couldn't actually create enough supply for them. Right? If you even take 1% of the 130 million today
Yeah.
that can afford my product, lives on their own, has the persona we talked about, even then I cannot create enough infrastructure for them. So I am not trying to convert people. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
The product will ultimately, life will convert them. Their own choices will convert them. I am just trying to find the right customer today to participate in the value proposition that I have. And then I think we speak for ourselves.
Sure.
Right? When COVID hit, it was a game changer for us. Up until COVID, we struggled to sell Antara Dehradun. And we were speaking
Okay.
before
So that
that.
was 3-4 years into launching the project.
So 2017, we residents started to move in. COVID hit 2020. We started sales in 2013. So what we sold between 2013 and 2020, we actually then sold within 1.5 years of COVID. And that was one of the very acute challenges of building that business, because we created Antara at a time when nothing really existed in terms of the price points that we were coming in at, or the offering we were coming in, or the location. Even our monthly charges were sort of 5x of any other community in India.
It's at about 60K per month or
It
more?
depends on the size of your apartment,
Sure.
but we don't really talk per square foot. But just to break it down here, it's 20 rupees a square foot, right? Which
Okay.
is a lot.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot more services bundled in
Correct.
that we believe add value to seniors as they are aging. So it was a very tough sell, and we had a legal model which was a lease model. We still do. It's not a
Yeah.
freehold.
Yeah.
We could have done a
Yeah.
freehold, But we wanted to create a model where people understood that they were buying into a community and not buying just physical real estate. We wanted to be able to manage how it was used, and we were wanting to be able to manage how it was going to have a succession plan,
Yeah.
because we don't want to think of this as just an investment that's under lock and key and that you'll resell when appreciation kicks in. Or so we created a lease model. So we actually created so many difficult
Yeah.
elements for ourselves, but we were convinced that it would sort of give us benefit in the long run, and that's the unlock that happened for us in COVID.
So what I'm also hearing is that the selection of Dehradun as a city is key because you're essentially catering to people who've had some affinity, some relatives,
Yeah.
who probably studied at Doon, Vellums, so they like the city, which
Yeah.
is why it's not been an inhibition to leave Delhi to go to Dehradun.
Yeah, but I will flip it on its head to say that when we started, we chose Dehradun actually for three reasons.
Okay.
One was because the cost of real estate was less, and we said ultimately this is an experiment at this point in time. Where can we reduce our risk? So that was one. Two, because it was the first city outside of the NCR where we had a Max hospital. At that time, my family, owned Max hospitals. And my brother was creating a wellness retreat called Vana, which is 7 minutes away. So we actually felt we were able to create an ecosystem. And three, of course, because Dehradun was known as a retirement destination. And we felt that if we want to create a retirement community, these three things are very important, because for us, having a healthcare facility within 20 minutes driving distance is sacred. We will not go anywhere where we can't do that, 20 to 30 minutes. So that's why we chose Dehradun. It was later that we said, okay, now how do we market this product? Who do we market it to? And that's when the persona started building of the various things we talked about. But very tough. It was very, very tough to do.
No, I can imagine because it's a tough business to sell, and it's tougher to sell to seniors.
Absolutely.
So it's a very niche category. So I'd want to understand for everyone. I saw Antara and I'm just absolutely blown away. I'm thinking I wish they did not have the 55 age limit and this was open to all, because I think more than senior living, the location is beautiful, the view of the mountains, of the valley, the vibe of the place is just fabulous. So when you launch such a product, firstly, let's understand when someone has to buy into a unit. I know it's all sold out, but when they had to buy into a unit, or if you had units available today, what do you think would the pricing look like? And for the audience, what are the terms of it? Like you mentioned, it's not freehold. So for how many years do they use it? What is the price they pay for it? What is the maintenance like? And what all do they get as part of the package?
Sure. So I can take an example of our last apartment that sold. We sold at about 25,000 rupees a square foot.
Okay.
Like, I still find it bizarre still.
Yeah.
Because I'm maybe still stuck in a little bit of when we were really hustling. But today, to be commanding that price point in a place like Dehradun, it's good. The team has done a good job. So that's roughly what it costs per square foot today. And our apartments range from about 1,800 square feet. Our penthouses are very large. So that's sort of the range of ticket size. Our monthly charges, so once you buy in, the monthly charges kick in whether you're using the apartment or not using the apartment. And as I mentioned, that's about 20 rupees a square foot, which has a bunch of services included. We have a lifetime guarantee of your entire apartment, all the fit outs, all the hardware in your apartment, because our hypothesis was that how can we create ease of living, like I mentioned, where tomorrow your tap doesn't work or the AC conks off or your wall needs a repaint. These are all tedious things that people have to deal with. Can we plug that in to our pricing model from the very beginning? Obviously, access to all our facilities. This includes checkups with our doctors. It includes nurses visits, all of those things. And a lot of subsidies are built in for our cuisine, etc. Because like I said, it all came from a place of ease of living. And what are the elements of life that actually help longevity and joy come in? Where you don't have to think twice about, shall I spend this 5 rupees or not? Because all of us as human beings, as we get older, that'll kick in. And then it's a lease model. So the lease model, essentially, you have the rights as if you had a freehold model. So you can sell it. If you decide not to live there, we will actually do the complete facilitation of finding a buyer. The entire value of that apartment comes back to you or your next of kin. We keep a small marketing fee.
So I have a few interjectory questions here, which is, say for the sake of simplicity, if someone wants to get a 2 BHK, What do you think would be the capital investment?
Mhm.
What does it multiply and come out to?
So our 2 bedroom is roughly about 2,000 square feet today.
Okay.
So
And that totals to about
at 25,000 rupees a square foot, upwards of about 5-ish crores.
5 crores for a
Yeah,
2 BHK.
for a 2 bedroom.
Okay. And
And
you have to be, for eligibility, you have to be above the age of 55.
yeah, you can be younger to buy, but to live, it would be we like you to be slightly older.
Okay. And then what is the period of the lease?
So the lease is actually a 60-year lease that gets
Okay.
renewed if your next of kin are eligible. So, for example, there was always this myth that after 60 years, you sort of don't own the asset anymore. That's not true.
So if someone's 50 when they're buying it,
By default, they're not going to,
I mean,
at
they,
least
they
right
won't,
now, they're not
yeah, they
living
won't. And if
60
they do, you
years.
would, I'm assuming for 2 years, you would
Of
very
course,
happily.
of course, we would
Yeah.
renew the lease. So, for example, in their lifetime, if they chose to exit Antara Dehradun, we would find a buyer. We would do a fresh 60-year lease for the new buyer.
Okay.
The
So it's not
entire
the remaining period.
It's not the
It's a
remaining
fresh
period.
60-year
It's
period.
a fresh 60-year period. The entire value of that apartment goes to the original owner minus a marketing fee that we keep because we are the ones selling it, keeping it,
Absolutely.
etc. And that's how that transaction closes.
Okay. And do people make any kind of, have they made any capital appreciation?
A fair amount. We've almost had from our original buyers in 2014 and 15, we have actually almost seen 70% appreciation in
Oh,
Antara
that's not,
Dehradun.
that's great.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a micro climate of its
Yeah.
own that it's developed.
I mean, you can't compare it to the return people get in plots, but the very fact that someone took a leasehold membership
Yeah.
and got a 70%
And
appreciation on
Sarthak,
it.
most people are not. We actually discourage people from looking at it as a financial investment. We
Correct.
want them to feel secure that it is a good investment,
Absolutely.
that it is not going to be a deteriorating investment.
Absolutely.
But we don't want you to think of this as a financial investment. This is a life investment. You are far better off putting that capital into some other real estate development that is going to be flipped, or putting it capital markets or whatever you want. This is a life investment.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you said that, because it's very difficult to speak with people, and I know this is not really pure real estate. It's difficult for people from real estate to really articulate that and position it like that. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is the about 5 crores today is the price for a 2 BHK. What is the monthly
So with
maintenance
GS,
coming to?
so with the 20 rupees roughly and GST etc. for that particular unit would be just under 60,000 rupees.
Okay.
And
And that would include housekeeping?
it doesn't include housekeeping. It includes upkeep of the entire infrastructure. It
Okay.
includes the doctor's visits, nurses' visits.
Oh, it includes doctors and nurses
It
visits.
includes a number,
I'm
once
sure.
a month doctor visit, unlimited nursing visits, and the subsidies that I talked about when it comes to nutrition, cuisine, physiotherapy, housekeeping, all of that.
Okay. And is it also that if someone wants housekeeping, which they would inadvertently do, that's part of the program, and those things would add up to say another 10-15,000?
It would depend what you would take, but for example, if you didn't have any of your own staff, let's put it that way, if you didn't have any of your own staff, you ate all your 3 meals with Antara, you had someone coming in for a few hours to deep clean your apartment, you used our car services to go here and there, your cost of living comfortably would be under 1 lakh of rupees.
Okay.
For all of these things that I have just mentioned.
Okay. With all 3 meals, all housekeeping, nursing visits,
Yes.
everything within 1 lakh,
Yeah.
all of this is taken care of. God forbid, unless there's some medical requirement of an
Correct.
emergency.
Or you want full-time staff from us, that would be that would be a higher number.
Yeah.
But for you to live comfortably where everything is taken care of, because you don't also necessarily need full-time staff if
Yeah.
you're not cooking, or someone's deep cleaning your apartment every day, or everything that you do is within the club premises, why would you
Sure.
really need a full-time apartment unless you need care?
Hmm.
So unless you needed a full-time staff member, which we also can provide, you could comfortably live within
Okay.
1 lakh of rupees.
And if someone for whatever reason is not feeling up to it and cannot go walk down to the club to have their meals, it's
Khana
all
comes
delivered.
to you. Absolutely.
Oh, wonderful.
Khana comes.
Okay, so this gives us an understanding of the investment, maintenance expenses, the capital appreciation. Now, if someone has taken it up, wants to use it, say during the summer, they say, I want to come to Dehradun, had a good time, and Delhi's too hot. The remaining months, a lot of times they probably want to Airbnb the property. Does that happen? Do people give it for short-term stays to people who are seniors?
Yeah. So when we actually started Antara, we discouraged that because, again, we did not want people to think of this as a holiday home
Yeah.
or a financial investment. We wanted people to start using it enough to make it their home. But now that we're full, and we have a wait list, and there are people who want to come and spend a few months here, we actually do speak to some of our residents who we know are not there through the year. And for a particular time period or a particular request, if they're happy to put it back into the pool, we service it, we set it up, and people do come. But it's not something we actively go out there
Understood.
and
But you
market.
facilitate
We facilitate
the
it.
transaction of
Absolutely.
rentals.
Because we are still, we take it very seriously to curate the community and the people that are spending time there. It's important that that is not compromised.
So were you part of the sales? Were you actually speaking with people? And they wanted to come speak with you because they knew,
they
okay,
didn't have a
I know
choice.
your family. I know your family.
Still happens.
Yeah.
So I can safely say that of the first 100 checks were all with my involvement. And I actually have to say, I think I got almost too attached and emotional to my first set of residents. So I've learned for the future communities to keep a little bit of space. But for Antara, Dehradun, absolutely, I was part of every sales conversation. And frankly, I don't know if it worked to my advantage or didn't, because I was a 23-year-old trying to sell
Wow.
to 60-year-olds
And create a category.
and create a category which had social stigma. It in a place like Dehradun, which wasn't sort of easy for people to wrap their head around. So it had this very interesting set of challenges at that point.
So now with all these learnings, what cities would be on your radar? Now I may say, maybe you would take a financial decision to say this is not the right time to enter a city for a product like Antara. But you would think other people who want to enter into this business.
Yeah.
What are some great markets that you would say are ripe for a product like this to come up?
So I think that we feel very strongly about the NCR market, which is why after Dehradun, we launched a project in Noida, in Antara, Noida, which will be operational this year. So we launched sales for that in 2019.
Okay.
Fully sold out, hopefully a second phase coming
And does
up.
it, I haven't seen it, does it look just as
So
good?
it's a very urban, dense community. It is actually in location the antithesis of Dehradun.
Okay.
And that was for a very strategic reason. So there were three big learnings from Dehradun that I wanted to test. One was, can I do this in an urban environment? Because we had so much pushback saying, आप हमें देहरादून क्यों भेज रहे हैं, आप दिल्ली में क्यों नहीं है? So I wanted to push and test that hypothesis. I wanted to test a product that was less expensive. So we almost, when we launched, we were almost 50% less than Antara Dehradun.
So in about 2.5 crores, people
you could enter into an Antara community.
Antara and Noida.
I mean, those price points have again doubled in the last 3.5 years.
But do you feel that it would in any way go against the brand of Antara that you've built in Dehradun? Do you think the price points then erode on a certain level of luxury that people associate it
We
with?
felt there was a risk, but I never entered Antara or created Antara thinking of myself as a luxury product. So the way I thought of Antara Dehradun was, here is a demography I want to serve. This is how I want to serve them. This is what serving them would look like. And this is what resonates with me as a human being, personality, my experience. Okay, this is what it's going to cost. Therefore, this is what we're going to sell at. Let's go and try and create a market for it. It's quite foolish when I think about it, right? Because the way to create a business is, this is your market, this is what they're willing to pay, what can I create for it? We went the complete other way.
Yeah.
We got lucky that it ultimately worked out, but I wanted to reverse it when I went into a Noida market.
Okay.
To say, this is a concept that has appreciation. This is my demography. This is what they're willing to pay. This is where they want to be. What is the best possible thing I could give them for that?
So Dehradun was product first and then hoping the right people would come.
Noida is customer
This
first.
is customer first, and you've kind of worked backwards.
Yes.
That's great, because now I'd want to understand. I am assuming Noida land rates would be more expensive than Dehradun, where you're building it?
So the third hypothesis I wanted to test. So first was, can I do this in an urban environment at half the price point without buying land and not doing a lease model? So I actually turned it all on its head. So now we actually, as Antara, will not go and buy land. It's not our expertise. It's not the space we want to be in. We are not a real estate company. We don't want to develop a skill set to go and buy land. So we will partner with developers.
Okay.
And that's when Noida was birthed. So we
Can
have
you
a
explain
partner.
that further?
So person had piece of land. They believed in senior care, senior living. They believed that they could command a premium if they partnered with us versus selling typical real
Okay.
estate. And we do actually, as a senior living brand, we've seen at least with Noida, we can command up to a 30% premium.
Okay. So what you're saying is that maybe there's a developer who's got a parcel of land, it could be several acres, and because they're not in the expertise of running senior living communities, they would partner up with an Antara to say, you take care of the operations. We are building the property in partnership
Actually,
and it comes up as a JV.
it's slightly different, Sarthak. The reason a real estate landowner would choose us is to say that, look, we can actually command a premium by selling senior living. So, one, they're saying, if I were to use my own expertise to build and sell this as real estate, I'd command 100 rupees. Whereas if I create a senior living concept, I can command 130 rupees. So, one is a pure financial decision, which is very gutsy for someone 6 years ago to have that
Absolutely.
belief. Today, it's
So Noida also started 6 years ago, and it's taken this much time, which is why it's ready for sale right now.
right. So 2019 we launched sales, then we started construction. It was a 4-year construction cycle. We'll be ready this year. And then we said that, look, our expertise is design architecture, it's sales because we know our customer, and obviously it's operations. So these are three things we will not relinquish. So we had to find a land partner who was willing to let us participate in design and quality management, sell the entire product, and then once it's fully ready, we are the operational responsibility for it.
Okay.
So that is how we are going to grow our residences vertical.
Okay.
So we launched Gurgaon last year, again in the same partnership model.
Okay.
Where Max Sustains owns the land, they will construct it for us basis our design and quality management. We do sales with them, and we will operate our community.
Okay. So suddenly, what I'm thinking is that it's not really that as big a capital investment as I was thinking, because
Yes.
then for Antara, you're not buying the land, you're not buying it from multiple people, consolidating, taking CLU approvals and whatnot,
Correct,
and then
correct.
even for the development or building of the properties is something that the developer takes care of.
Right.
So that's an investment they put in.
Correct. So from a capital utilization perspective, it's a large amount of capital because at the end of the day, somebody is putting the capital into
Absolutely.
the land and building it. So the risks associated with it being successful or not still are the same. The difference is our risk is around brand, reputation, operations, and the risk for a developer is any typical risk they would have on a real estate project, depending on the velocity of sales.
Okay.
But to come back to your question, sorry, you had asked which geographies
Yeah.
are we interested in, and what advice would I give to other players? I actually think that there is a potential demand for senior living in all tier 1, tier 2 cities in Delhi. We would love to be in Chandigarh, like we discussed. We would love to be in Bangalore, Chennai, and Hyderabad.
Okay.
A lot of interest for Pune and Bombay. But we also don't want to spread ourselves out so much that we're just running around, because it still takes a level of deep design thinking, quality management, and just a feeling of serving this population versus just building after building.
So I want to understand from an architectural design perspective, you said it's different and it has a premium, it costs more. What do you think are important elements which maybe because I don't belong to that category of people, I can't intuitively think of it,
Right.
which have been realizations for you where when it was being built, said, okay, this needs to be built in because now I've realized this is a need. Are there any unique things which normally are not seen to the naked eye?
We spent so much time on design architecture for Antara Dehradun that thankfully we got 9 out of 10 things right. We're a completely step-free ecosystem.
Oh,
in
so
the
there are
entire community.
ramps
Everywhere. There are
everywhere.
slopes and ramps everywhere. All our materials on the floor have a slip coefficient of 11, which means when you drop water, how much of a resistance still exists even after it's being
Even outdoors?
even outdoors. Um, our lighting levels, for example, there have to be certain lux levels in public spaces. Your fire safety protocols have to be a certain way. So there are a lot of nuances, and we actually partnered with Perkins Eastman in New York. Again, it was an expense, and that was what added to all the expense, right? Because when you have an international architect, it's far more expensive per square foot than having a local architect.
And what kind of facilities do you think happen to be most used? And are there any facilities that you think add to the charm of the place but from a functionality perspective are not used as much but are great to have.
So let me put it differently. I think what we didn't design enough for was multi-purpose spaces.
Okay.
We put fixed usage to all of our spaces and later realized that, look, we haven't, for example, designed a large enough yoga space.
Okay.
Because yoga, as an example, is something everybody loves to do as a group. And to be able to do it in a group, you need that much more space. And we didn't realize that 3 months of the year, it's a lot of rain in Dehradun.
Oh.
And 1 month of the year is significant
Yeah,
amount
because
of
you would think
heat.
you can do it outdoors
We have
in the
so much
sun.
outdoor space and we have shaded space, but that's not good in rainy environments. So yoga was one thing that we actually took over a space. We redid it in Antara, Dehradun, and now that's become a solid indoor yoga space. It can also be used for other things. So that was one thing we hadn't designed for. We hadn't originally designed a space for grandchildren coming to visit. And actually, till I didn't have my own children, even I didn't fully realize
Like
it.
the play area.
We didn't have a playroom. Now you
Yeah.
must have seen a play
Yeah.
space, which has also changed from one area to another area recently. But we never had that. We thought, how do I make grandchildren say, I want to visit my grandparents Antara, Dehradun, mom, dad, take me there for my summer holidays. So the children's space we hadn't accounted for, which we did later.
Okay. So I understand it is creating a category, but when I try and benchmark the business model, uh, when I look at Antara Dehradun, I think it's a real estate project. Then when I visited it personally, I was like, man, this is a hospitality company, like really competing with the best of the best. Now, when you tell me about how you've structured Noida, I again think it's almost like a service maintenance companies, which are typically attached to your real estate developers that take care of services, the housekeeping, and all of that. How do you benchmark yourself now? The reason I ask this is because for others who would want to start who don't have this kind of capital, what would be your playbook? What should be the value proposition that you bring to the table? That now, when you approach a developer, you say, this is what I have experience in. Would you say hospitality is most important? Or would you say understanding seniors is more important? Is it the architecture which is most important, which will help you create a better JV where even the developer feels you're adding enough value which the developer can't bring in? Because I would assume if you're doing it with an independent developer in Noida, after one project, he would figure out and he would have everything in place. And he'd say, okay, this is easy for me to replicate. Where lies the moat?
Antara, first and foremost, is a senior care company.
Okay.
We have 3 different verticals under it. One is residences, one is what we call care homes, which is assisted living, and our third vertical is products, AGZ. But for anybody wanting to enter this space, they have to be driven by impacting the life of a senior. They can choose to do it like us by being an integrated ecosystem and touching various products and services at different aging periods at different price points, or they can pick a lane. They can say, I just want to create residences for seniors.
Okay.
But even then, you have to be conscious of the fact that you have to develop all of the 4 skill sets you mentioned.
Okay.
Antara, Noida is over 1,000,000 square feet of development and infrastructure and building that we are ultimately responsible for. So we started there, but we realized that there is another demography that may not invest at the right time, but will still need care as they get older. And there are people who live alone who need 24/7 care, can't manage it in their home themselves. Children don't live with them, and who will want to move into an assisted living facility, what we call care home, for either short term, mid term, long term. So we have now 600 beds by the end of the year.
And where are these?
This is NCR. We just launched in Bangalore and we're about to launch in Chennai.
Are they right next to hospitals?
They're close to hospitals. We consider ourselves a care facility because, like I said, people come to us maybe post hospitalization. They still need an intense level of care but don't need to be in a hospital, are not ready to go home.
So maybe with this, I'm thinking that it's another go-to market for someone who wants to enter this space.
Absolutely.
They could think of taking, say, certain units on rent.
Right.
And saying, I'm going to build an assisted living facility here because it's right next to a hospital. And I would assume a place like Gurgaon, there's a cluster of hospitals in the same, within a radius of just about 5 kilometers. You've got a bunch of them together. And there are so many such real estate properties which are thriving on just foreign tourists coming in, needing it for 2-3 months.
Correct.
So you could just take that place and build this?
Well, I wouldn't make it that easy, simply because there are a lot of compliances that you must follow, and that is something we are really trying to enforce. We're working with medical councils to create standards around our care homes and other care homes. Yes, you can say I'll take 3 apartments in a condo and set it up. You
So it's
could.
not just nursing. You're
It's
saying
not
there's a
just
lot
nursing.
more.
It's not just nursing, but it is very challenging, Sarthak.
And it's a services business. It's so
Very
hard.
challenging. And for a brand like ours, where we feel every pain point of our customer, it is the thing I dread every day, is getting that message to say your nurse didn't show up today.
Yeah.
And to retain nurses, to retain caregivers, to incentivize them, for them to show up in the right uniform with the right mindset, is very tough, because people also don't want to pay, because they will compare you to your didi and bhaiya at home. Okay,
Yeah.
double of this is what I'm paying you. And so home care is very tough, but it is important to do, and we try.
The third vertical you also mentioned of products. I know I'm shifting gears and
I was going to come back to that,
yeah.
actually.
So the third vertical on products, I also feel for a lot of people who want to start up,
Yeah.
probably don't have access to as much capital,
Yeah.
can't think of taking on such a Herculean task of just running those services and maintenance services. Do you see any products internationally which you think definitely are underpenetrated in India, which you could be launching in your line, but you feel a lot more competition can come in and should
So
come in?
I actually think the dedicate a dedicated space or a platform or a brand where someone who is aging can go to and say, listen, actually my knee is also bothering me. At the same time, my bathroom feels a bit slippery and my wife is coughing, so I really need something to help her lung health. Just to have a single point to arrive at that gives you solutions to your needs, I think is a great place to be, and which is what we're trying to do with our brand Age Easy.
Wonderful. I'm so glad, and I think you've so generously answered practically all of my questions. And I had planned that I would probably ask you about from a real estate perspective, in how many units do you really recover the cost and stuff like that. I think it's in between all of this. I think it's too trivial. It's too trivial a question, because my takeaway is more towards your passion to really serve a particular set of customer or community, and then go deep, and someday everything will kind of fall in place when you hire the right people, have the right vision, right intention.
Thank you.
Thank you for making time.
No,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Media, wearables, clubs, communities, and work for the retired. There's a lot that we can do to improve the lives of the silver generation. With good karma, there's also enough money to be made in the process. This is Founder's Office with Sarthak Ahuja.